for round 2 of our budget workshop. We have 2 board members that are about 3 minutes out, but we'll get started without them and start with what I'd like to do, since we already, for the first time that I can remember, have gone through the book completely. Can you hear me?
You gotta put closer.
Oh. My teacher voice isn't carrying?
Oh, you got it.
Oh, okay, thank you, Mr. Pepe. What I'd like to do, since we've already gone through the book, I'd like to go over the questions and the answers that we have so far. We've been given a sheet with the questions and answers. I didn't realize we asked that many questions, but there's additional questions that are in there. Just so the public is aware, and the people here and people watching, the budget, the question and answer grid, the presentation, Mr. Medanci's presentation, as well as, I believe, the special ed, are all on the Board of Ed website under budget?
Yep.
Okay. So that anybody in the public who wants to see that, and I apologize, I wasn't aware that the budget book that I have wasn't the same as what the audience had the other night, on Tuesday night, so your pages and my pages did not line up properly, but what is on the Board of Ed website is this actual book. So you will be able to see everything that we have here.
But the data in both books is the same.
The
Correct.
data in both, yes, it's just the page numbers didn't line up, I guess, when you were,
They have
when
a
I was saying.
summary, they have a summary
Yeah,
packet
yeah.
versus the
Yeah, we
full
had the
detailed
whole,
book.
we had the full package, so my apologies, I didn't realize that. So,
So
we're
the
gonna,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. The
Interrupt.
versions that are here tonight are consistent with our page numbering.
Oh,
So if you
okay.
say page 24, they should have page 24.
perfect, okay.
And I also want to point out that the budget information that you just mentioned is on the business department page on our website. So if you go to central office and business, and then there's a budget tab.
Okay,
And
that's where it is,
it's
okay,
located.
terrific, thank you, okay. So, okay, Mr. Pajewski, come on down. All right, so I'm just gonna go over the questions that we have with the answers, and the board members, if we have any, additional, if you need any additional information. But, do you want me to read them? Or you
So-
wanna read them?
Well, one thing I would want to share is a lot of the questions that are on the grid, even though they were asked and answered Tuesday night, we were recording those questions and answers in real time. So you get to a point, the first several, to be quite honest with you, all the way up to about Jumpstart number 20 is where we said we'd look into it and get back to you kind of thing. But 1 through 19 were all asked and answered in that meeting.
Oh, okay,
I think there might have been a few we had to go back and get specific runs on. So we can go through them, starting with one, but if it's one that you guys already know because we were all there, then
okay.
just informational for
Start
your
from
own
the
sake.
top, 'cause we have some members who are here as well,
Yeah,
so.
okay, we can do that, yeah. David wasn't here. Good evening, sir. Okay, we're just gonna start with the questions.
Yeah, that's
Okay. Question number 1 was from Bob. We are often told that in business, when new initiatives are created, they also look at current practices and eliminate anything deemed not to be working effectively. Have we done that, and do we have an answer for that question? And the response is, unlike a business, our customers are students. If they are not progressing, we invest more of them. We do not reduce. Question number 2, is there any plan to explore early retirement incentives? And the answer to that is, in accordance with the contract language, certified staff hired prior to July 1st of 2013 will receive a payment of $1,400. Certified staff are required to notify the HR department prior to January 5th in order to receive the incentive. To date, we have had 7 staff who notified us of their intent to retire in June of 2025. We have 1 staff who notified us of their retirement after the January 5th deadline. We have 16 staff with 30-plus years of service. 9 of them are in shortage areas, which could prove to be difficult to fill and most likely would result in hiring staff at higher salary levels, thus reducing the dollars anticipated through attrition. If they retire in accordance with the contract language, they may remain on our insurance until 65, but are responsible for full pay.
So, and I just think that's an important number, that we only have 16 staff that have 30-plus years experience. We have 600 certified staff. And so I know this board went through that in negotiations, that one of our challenges was the increment movement, because there weren't as many teachers with that top step experience, given that they were aging through the grid.
We used to have 16 staff getting recognized for 30-plus years.
Yeah.
of service.
No.
That's
Yeah.
a major flip-flop.
Okay, any other? No? Okay. Are there any plans to explore more solar energy options? And we are in the process of adding solar to the new section of roof at Southington High School. When this is completed, we will consider adding solar to other properties. Mr. Darrenowski?
Yeah, can I,
Yeah.
I saw that. I think that's a great question, Bob. Question I have is, if this was to be done, who benefits from the return from the solar? Does it go to the town, or does it go to the Board of Ed?
You want to speak to that?
Sure. Usually the solar, and don't quote me on this, the solar is behind the meter, and each of the meters is charged to each school. So they would come through our accounts at Eversource and reflect on our budget because we would be paying them.
Okay.
And the person who's actually just submitted the plans for the high school solar project might be able to elaborate on that a little more.
Yeah, good evening. So this solar at the high school is different than what we've done in at the other schools. It still ends up the way that Ms. Melissa is explaining to you, but we are going to own this solar. All the other ones are PPAs. This one, we're actually going to own. The payback period should be less than 3 years, and so it's going to be a very nice one for us.
Okay, great.
Mr. Brown?
Yeah, I suggested this 10 years ago, and people laughed at me, but I want to suggest it again. We've always had a parking problem at the high school. The students park in the streets around the high school, and we have complaints and stuff. Can we explore the possibility of building a parking garage in the parking lot, charging people to park, and then putting solar panels on the roof of the parking garage? And it's just an idea to be looked at in the future, but I think you would actually make money off of doing that.
Not for this budget.
No. Thank you for that, Mr. Brown. No, but it's an idea. It's an idea. Okay. Question number 4, paraprofessional development, is it mandated? Effective 23-24 school year, the General Assembly revised state law requiring BOEs to make available 18 hours of PD for paras. In accordance with contract language, we already provide between 6.25 hours, staff who work less than 27.5 hours per week, and 18.5 hours, staff who work 27.5 hours or more a week of training. However, within the mandated 18 hours, you cannot include the annual mandated trainings that are required for our paras, sexual harassment, Title IX, bloodborne pathogens, etc. The additional 18 hours occur on selected early release Tuesday afternoons when students are dismissed. The paras are paid to attend those professional development sessions during these times to meet the 18-hour requirement.
Yeah.
Okay? Okay. Could you tell us, question number 5, could you tell us the non-certified positions eliminated? When reviewing the staffing during December, we had vacant positions in the paraprofessional and ABA therapist groups. Those positions were eliminated.
And I just want to elaborate on that if I can. Those are justified vacant positions that we certainly could use, but because of the labor shortage, people weren't applying for them and we weren't able to fill them. But I don't want it to be misinterpreted as if they were expendable positions just sitting there, because that's certainly not the case. We are constantly trying to do more with less, and that's what our paras are doing right now, given the shortage. So just want that, to clarify there.
Okay. Okay, the 23-24 actual spending in the substitute line is over budget, $521,000. How are we tracking now on the substitute budget? Where is the offset? In the fiscal year 24-25, we have encumbered the salaries for the building substitutes and any known long-term sub based on their scheduled days, for example, 5 days a week or 3 days a week. Daily subs are paid as they work and are not encumbered. As of the 1/10/25 payroll, the substitute lines are over budget by $481,000, including the encumbrance through June for the building subs. The offset to the over budget substitute line falls in the certified teacher account savings from staff vacancies across the district. A small increase is requested to this line item as the minimum wage in Connecticut increases annually.
So are we still short subs?
Yes. Yeah, and I will be, I started, I mentioned it to you in one of my past updates, trying to come up with a substitute teacher proposal that would hope to rectify that to the best of our ability. Mrs. Passamano and I are working on that. That is compounded now because as of January 1, minimum wage went up. The hourly rate has changed. So when you calculate the amount, the hours that the subs work against the new minimum wage hourly rate, we're right up against that threshold. And I think we can all agree a substitute teacher is a hard job. And I think for minimum wage, people could do other things that are not as difficult. And so I think that's some of our challenge right now with getting the substitute teachers, both the long-term subs and the daily subs. So that's something we're going to continue to work on and have to bring you a proposal really outside of this budget process because we need to address it this year as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Question number 7. What was our health insurance increase last year? Fiscal year 24-25 budget has a final increase in health insurance of 5.87 or $947,876. The initial superintendent version for fiscal year 24-25 requested an increase of 8.8 or an increase of 1.4 and change based on the budget set by the Self-Insurance Committee in December of 2023. The budget set by the Self-Insurance Committee is funded partially by the employee's cost share. The employee contributions are variable year over year due to the number of employees participating in the health plan. Anyone good? Okay. 2.9 million in health insurance increase. Will it come down a little bit? We expect the Self-Insurance Committee to review the claims through November or possibly December if available from Anthem on January the 22nd. They may vote to take action on a budget funding level at that meeting. Electricity is low. Do we feel comfortable? The budget is set with the assistance of the energy consultant. However, we know that the kilowatt usage is variable. A new supply contract was signed effective November 2024. The first Eversource monthly invoices with the higher supply cost have been received. We will continue to monitor the monthly actual expenditures to the amounts encumbered on each account. Actual expenditures for electricity in fiscal year 23-24 were 1.5 million and change, with the account numbers 32120, 82321. The budget for fiscal year 24-25 is 1.7, and the requested budget for fiscal year 25-26 is 1.8 and change. Any question? Nope, you good? Okay. Are we seeing a decrease in magnet school tuition? This line item is driven by enrollment in magnet schools, which has decreased, particularly since the pandemic. The fiscal year 25-26 budget was calculated at the 58% tuition rate, consistent with the fiscal year 24-25 budget. Okay, is the 5-year refresh the replacement cycle? Account 32324 replaces smart boards with interactive displays, projectors, 8 to 10-year replacement plan. The computer labs are 7 years, switches are 7-year, Wi-Fi access point 5 to 7 years. The account 54400 are the staff laptops, that's a 5-year. And the Chromebook replacement, 4 years assigned to students, 3 years in a classroom set. MP&E on the summary page, did we move the line item? The smart boards with interactive displays were funded under the MP&E in fiscal year 24-25 in the amount of $70,600. In May 2024, the district was awarded a PEGPETA,
Pegpecia.
I was really close, grant in the amount of $20,400, allowing us to reduce the operating budgets for smart boards from $91,000 using the grant amount of $20,400. For 25-26, we moved the request for the replacement cycle for the smart boards to account 32324, the district-wide computer hardware, in fiscal year 25-26, since we feel it is required operating expenditure. That same account will be used going forward. Okay. Moving right along. When talking about scheduling, are we only going to have 2.4 teachers added? Are we making certain that we are targeting the students that need the extra care? Can you provide reassurance? Are we going to be losing teachers in the middle schools? I'm going to take a drink first. If we reorganize using the structure of the new middle school schedule, we will need 2.4 teachers. If we do not use the newly proposed schedule, we will require 6 positions. The middle school schedule incorporates an intervention block, which will be identical in both buildings in terms of organization and time of day. This is dedicated time for students to receive targeted intervention. If we implement the new schedule, a reduction in unified arts teachers will occur. However, that reduction offsets the needed increase in core academic areas to make the shift. Okay? Okay. How can the oil heat go down? The district locks, I'm just laughing, I'm thinking of Mrs. Carmody with the heat on, that's all. The district locks into a contract price to purchase oil. The rates were favorable in the fall, so we were able to lock in with a savings of $10,000. Textbooks are going down. Are they still charging fees from going online? Yes, there are e-licenses associated with textbook purchases that vary in terms of length, ranging from 3 to 5 years, depending upon negotiated terms. Also, these costs are not for new textbooks, they are for replacements. For athletic supplies, uniforms, are these rolling replacements as needed? Have we looked into public and private partnership to help sponsor teams? It is a rolling replacement. The district did seek private funding for middle school athletics in years prior, and it proved to be unsustainable, at which time the board reinstated funding. The uniforms for swim and dive, along with gymnastics teams, are not returned for hygienic reasons and are an annual expense. Do you want to, yep?
Yeah, I know it was a very, it was a great idea back then, and I know they did try it. I feel that what happened is that there wasn't enough publicity, there wasn't enough action from the board or the staff to really reach out to the private sector to make this happen. I think when it was originally discussed, it was before social media was as prevalent as it is now. I'm wondering if somebody was to undertake that role to kind of reach out, whether it be a booster club or whatever, to try and, you know, get that going again. And other towns, I think, have done it successfully. I know Southington is a little larger than most of these smaller towns, but
I think the concern that I would have is the fact that when you have an organization outside of the school say, oh yeah, we'll sponsor a team, and then they can't sponsor anymore, then what happens after that? I think that there's always that question of, is it sustainable?
yeah.
With
I
outside
agree.
factors.
I mean, at one time, we had an effort that went out to have banners put around the football fields and baseball fields and so forth for advertising. And, that went to help support the sport. And it's,
Sell a lot of them anymore, remember?
yes. And it kicked off and it went well for 1 year.
That's it.
And to your point, the second year, everybody just assumed it would automatically happen, but there was nobody behind it to drive it. So I think and I think this was a great idea.
If there was some way we could.
Yeah, I think, Joe, that was your idea? I still think it's a great idea. I would recommend you being the
In his free time.
lead on that.
Well,
I'm only kidding.
yeah, because Zaya, were you on that committee? Yeah. And it just,
It worked great, it was great.
Yeah.
We sold like crazy. Then there was some sign regulations that went into effect, but then year after year, it went down and went down further,
Yeah.
and then it disappeared.
Even when a company, I remember because I had just started in my prior role, they would be excited, they'd pay for the banner, but when you went to collect the following year, they didn't want to re-up. They assumed that they were purchasing space for a banner. They didn't realize there was an annual cost associated with it, and I think that's the sustainability piece.
That's the part.
Yeah, and I can see their point. I mean, when you have a $100 million budget, this line item is really not it's a very small portion of it. But I think it's, to me, it's more getting the community involved than it is, looking to support financially, sports activities.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go. 17. We have assumed a 4% cost escalation. Does this seem adequate? I believe this was referencing the budget 4% device cost increase. We are fairly confident that we can keep them to a 4% increase this year. We stress that we are looking at all possible vendors and PC models. This brings forth the most competitive pricing we can get while ensuring that staff devices are of good quality. Okay. Does E-rate only apply to cost of service costs or devices as well? E-rate is federal. How do they dole out the funds? Does Southington have the same opportunities? Unfortunately, E-rate does not apply to staff or student devices. We were able to obtain a limited time grant to facilitate these purchases called ECF. They are currently no plans to see another ECF round. E-rate is determined by our free and reduced lunch numbers. This obtains us a 50% discount on wide area network and internal network equipment. We have the same or similar opportunities as other towns, but the district's responsible percentage, 50%, will vary from town to town. Okay. What is cut and what remains from summer school? As summer school is currently unfunded in the budget, elementary and middle level interventions will not be offered. Last summer, 93 elementary students and 33 middle school students received these services. High school credit recovery will default to a tuition-based model. Last summer, 35 students regained credit without charge. Pre-COVID summer school had not been funded from the operating budget. The district used ARP ESSER funds for summer school for the last few years. These funds are no longer available. Summer school was never funded in the operating budget in pre-COVID years. Okay, all right. How many students are in the summer school Jumpstart? 15 students were in Jumpstart last summer. What are the roles of an ABA therapist and BCBA analyst? A BCBA, which stands for Board Certified Behavior Analyst, primarily works to assess and address challenging student behaviors by developing and implementing individualized behavior intervention plans, often collaborating with teachers and other staff to promote positive behavior strategies within the classroom and school-wide systems, particularly for students with special needs. They utilize data-driven approaches to analyze behavior and track progress towards goals. Key responsibilities of a BCBA in a public school include conducting functional behavior assessments, also known as FBAs, which is observing students to understand the function of their challenging behaviors and identify potential triggers and consequences. Developing behavioral intervention plans, which is creating personalized plans based on the functional behavior assessment results, outlining specific strategies to address problematic behaviors and teach desired skills. Positive behavior support, implementing school-wide positive behavior support systems to promote positive behaviors and create a supportive learning environment. Collaborating with teachers and staff, providing training to support educators on how to implement behavior interventions within a classroom. Data collection and analysis, monitoring student progress through data collection and using this information to adjust interventions as needed. IEP, individualized education program participation, contributing expertise on behavioral needs during the IEP meetings. And they supervise ABA therapists, overseeing the work of ABAs who directly implement behavior interventions with students. The ABA therapist is a professional trained in applied behavioral analysis who works to provide individual support to students with behavioral and learning challenges, focusing on improving academic performance, social skills, and managing challenging behaviors by implementing evidence-based strategies tailored to each student's needs. They collaborate closely with teachers and other staff to create effective behavior intervention plans and monitor student progress. That's a mouthful. Yeah. Can I repeat that? No, but you can read it. It's either online or in the packet in front of you. The increase for special ed transportation is high. Line items 83332, 83335. Is this associated with the cost of the new contract? There are many variables that are considered, but the cost of the new contract is the primary reason for the increase. For our out-of-town transportation, could we see the run rate of how we are tracking the current budget? Out-of-town transportation costs are highly variable depending upon each student's specific needs and the distance involved. We strive to secure the most cost-effective solutions on a case-by-case basis, which can range from parent transportation to lift-equipped vehicles with an aid. For the 23-24 school year, the average cost per student was $28,303, with a low of $8,800 and a high of $120,741. Yeah. For the 24-25 school year, the average cost per student has increased to $33,790, with a low of $11,475 and a high of $87,021. So far this year, we have encumbered and spent $2,257,075 out of the almost $2.3 million allocated budget, leaving a balance of $36,724.
Are you saying that we're gonna be over budget?
No, I'm saying that Mrs. Mallet and Pupil Services and Mr. Romano pretty much nailed the moving target because this is what we've encumbered, not what we've expended thus far. So if anything changes between now and June, which unfortunately is highly likely, we're only in January, then right now we have 36,000 left that was budgeted for, so that potentially could put us over budget. You know, as you can see, one student could put you drastically over the budget. Yeah,
So if we were to get one more student. who
put you
needed
right
to-
about there. Yep.
Yep, okay. Yeah. For line item 83370, how are we on track for this year, and are we running the risk of getting hit again? Are there a number of students that account for this category? Can I have that number? Okay. We currently have 55 students outplaced for this school year. Each student is evaluated annually, and the possibility exists to bring students back into the district. Based on the current information that we have surrounding these students and our initial internal excess cost analysis, we are proposing the reduction at this time. How many students do we now have in preschool? What is going on with it next year and its impact? We have 3-year-old students with individual education plans, 31 of them. 4-year-old students with IEPs, 35 of them, 2 pending evaluations, and 5-year-olds with IEPs, 10. IEPs are the individual education plans. Total students with IEPs attending the integrated preschool, 76, with 11 in referral. Students receiving itinerant speech services, 27. Total pre-K students with IEPs, 103. Community peers, we have, in the 3-year-old community peers, 22. In the 4-year-old community peers, 30. In the 5-year-old community peers, 6. Total community peers, 58. Total number of pre-K student registered with Southington Public Schools, 161. Next, with 11 in referral. Could I ask, what is in referral? What is?
So those are students that don't currently have an IEP, but are being evaluated to
Oh,
see if they're
okay.
eligible for special education. So the numbers that we give you, when we say, I'll give you an example, 5-year-old students with IEPs 10, that could go up to 11 if one of those 11 referrals qualifies.
Okay, okay. Next year, there will be no grant funding for those who are denied the waiver. Those families will have to pay tuition in order to enroll their child in preschool.
Can I also point out on that item, the community peers are the students that pay to attend the preschool, and those identified with an IEP or special education don't pay any tuition for the preschool program.
Can you explain what poor vehicle condition is? Specifically, the 1999 F-250. This vehicle is used primarily by a laborer who performs field maintenance. The vehicle remains in town. The doors have been patched and rehung. It has an extensive amount of rust. The staff has continually replaced portions of the floorboard. Oh, okay. And there's a picture.
I-
Yes.
You know, at what point do we make a decision, you know, it may run, okay, but at some point, I want to make sure that we don't have an accident, we don't have somebody get hurt, and at some point, this could be a catastrophe waiting to happen.
So we had that conversation the other night. Mr. Oshana brought up that exact point. Can you ensure that if it's still being used, that we're not facing a safety issue? And Mr. Romano spoke to that, you know, the regular maintenance that needs to be done, you know, in terms of tires, brakes, you know, running mechanical condition is something that does occur. But the reality when we put it as a safety concern, he also explained, just because of the mere fact that it's 25 years old, when you start to have body rot and you know it should be anticipating major mechanical issues, means that responsible budget, and you should be asking for something and not try to ride it out as longer than you need to. And so that was why we recommended that purchase of a new vehicle. That's the white truck you see pretty much lining the fields all the time, if you drive by the high school.
Yeah.
It's got the paint buckets in it and the sprayer and all that stuff.
It's mostly a convenience vehicle than anything else.
Yeah, but we keep it in town on purpose too, all right? And I think Mr. Romano spoke to that. Like, if there is a need for a vehicle that has to go run to a supply house, we know we're not taking that vehicle. That doesn't mean if we didn't have a more reliable vehicle, we wouldn't be able to use it for that purpose, but we know, given the age of this vehicle, to keep it close.
Okay.
Mr. Romano, do you want to add something to that?
Can you come up to the mic?
And Mr. Darrenowski, the other thing we spoke of the other night was that this vehicle that we're talking about is up for replacement, and we've entered a request on the capital plan through the town to replace the vehicle, so.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it is not a convenience vehicle. This is a truck that gets used every single day, and many times this has a trailer behind it that is pulling equipment for lining the fields or whatever else it may need. It is safe at the moment, but we have to plan for basically could be 2 years out with how long it takes to get vehicles off the state contract list. It's serviced at a local garage where they keep an eye on it. The frame is in good shape, but overall, it is 25 years old. It has a decent amount of mileage on it, and it just doesn't represent us well.
Okay. I just have one question then.
Sure.
Would it pass a DOT safety inspection?
I'm gonna say at this time, yes, but it's not something that's got a lot of time left on it.
Okay.
Okay?
I'd rather be safe than sorry.
Totally agreed.
Yeah.
I have to say, you've all done a great job. When I first arrived here 10 years ago, we had quite a few, I don't know, I'm sure if you can remember, we had trucks that we were given from the water department because they didn't feel that they should be used anymore, and here we were using them. So we've come a long way. Ms. Millette has done a great job working with the vendors to get adequate pricing on the vehicles that we need, and we're pleased with where we're at. This is the oldest one on the list. It's always gonna be that. There's always gonna be another old one on the list, but this is the one that we really felt need to be replaced.
Yeah. I actually have a 2004 vehicle that I just had registered as an antique.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought you were gonna donate it for us.
Yeah.
They were just about to be.
And it is in far better shape than your truck.
Well, thank you.
The other thing is, and I believe those of you who are on the finance committee have talked a lot about vehicles and fleets and all that stuff recently. Even the one that we got from the town last year with the capital plan, even if the funding is approved, just the lead time in ordering these vehicles right now and actually getting them is quite a ways out. So I think even that adds to like the need to put budget for it now, because we know we're not gonna get it as soon as we would like to have it.
Now, why is that? Because I mean, like, I go by, what's the place in Berlin? With the T, but there's a Ford dealership over there that constantly has like fleet vehicles and things you can put a dump body on or utility bed on and that type of thing. What, is it because like we have to go through the, like, state contracted?
Sure, we usually, the state contract allows us to fulfill our purchasing procedures as far as something that's over $10,000. And in the past, we used to do 4-year financing of the purchase. And the last few years, we've put the vehicles on the town's capital plan, which will, remove it from our budget request. And that's really what it is. It's the state contract, and when you buy through the state contract, when you put the purchase order in, that's when the Ford dealer orders the vehicle to be built through the manufacturer. So we literally are requesting a specific vehicle, they manufacture that vehicle, it comes back to us, as opposed to buying off of a
Buying off a lot.
pre-existing lot.
Yeah, we couldn't go to whatever dealership you're talking about and saying, here's what the state bid price is for this vehicle, so we want you to sell it to us for that price.
You couldn't give them the option to, or
I mean,
have we ever tried that?
you'd have to go out to bid at that point, because all the dealerships would want that option. So we know we have the price on the state bid list.
Gotcha. So it just seems sort of, again, like, maybe they can't match that price or something like that, but it seems a little convoluted that we wouldn't at least, I don't know. like,
Well, the state contract price is it's a pre-bid,
Pre-negotiated.
right, and so Ford and other manufacturers have worked with the state, and the state not promises a certain number of vehicles, but based on a volume that may come through the purchasing on that contract, they're able to give us a price based on the volume that they're anticipating, and it's a multi-year contract for the manufacturers.
Okay. We good? Okay, question number 27, was the relocking of the keys a safety issue? The answer is this is more of an efficiency issue for coming out of lockdowns if ever required. All doors have functioning locking cylinders at this time. This request for cylinders and keys for the interior doors, not exterior, at Southington High School. There have been multiple additions and renovations at SHS, each introducing a different door hardware and key systems which the administration and custodians must manage. Some staff members are required to carry multiple keys. This request is year 2 of a multi-year project. The request is for material funding only. Our in-house carpenter is collaborating with administration to consolidate keys to a single Grandmaster system. Reducing the number of keys will decrease the total of number distributed. It will also simplify the process for first responders during a lockdown release. Okay? Do we have a grant writer? As needed, part-time hourly grant writer continues to exist. Why is the Ag Side grant split between 2 lines? The district receives the first ASTE grant from the state. The first $373,400 of the grant is recorded by the town. The remainder comes to the schools. The new line for the Ed Reform grant represents the 42% of the tuition not billed to the sending districts in the current year. Okay. The state has consistently fallen short of their stated funding requirements. What are our options to force them to meet these requirements? Continued lobbying through our professional organizations, CABES, CAPS, and CASBO, all of which we are members of, have been consistently at the forefront of this. Additionally, the superintendent communicates regularly with our delegate on the Education Committee and is currently working to support a bill to assist with funding relative to special education costs. That bill has been introduced. The district is not aware of a mechanism beyond this.
Yeah, I mean, the only other way would be a Dare to Be Great type of proposal and file some sort of lawsuit against the state. You know, the district would, and maybe other districts would sign on to it, but
We talked about that a few years ago. I remember the conversation of saying some of these smaller towns, and Southington is not a smaller town, but in comparison to some of the larger cities, getting a consortium of these smaller towns to, for lack of a better word, flex their muscle when it comes to saying, the regulation says you need to do this, and you're not doing this, so you're not meeting your stated mandate of what you're supposed to do.
So-
If a normal person didn't meet their stated mandate of what they were required to do, they would be forced to do that. Now, granted, that money has to come from somewhere.
So a good example of that is actually the Chef case, where they did sue and prevailed, and that was in Hartford. But that was backed by several groups that not only school systems, civic groups, civil groups, to help support, the cause.
The trouble, of course, is that we look at the impact that that has on our budget in our town, and it rolls up and it rolls down both ways. But we can't figure out what our budget's gonna be because we don't know what we're gonna get. We expect it's gonna be 100%. Well, we never expect it's gonna be 100 because even though it's supposed to be 100%, we don't get it. So we say 70. Well, it's not gonna be 70, maybe 65, well, maybe 62. How do you set a budget when it's something like that? And the frustrating part, and we've all said this, right, is the state says it's going to be this, but they don't live up to their own requirements. So I don't, is it the court system? Is it something else? Is it a consortium of towns that go up there and say, whatever? The piece of legislation you're working on with the delegate on the Education Committee, Chris, that's great, and that would be helpful in terms of the amount of times. It's 3 times versus 4 times the cost. That's one item, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of other items that they're not meeting their mandated requirements for, so.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Okay?
Not to add something to your list of things to do, but, could we potentially run something like that down? To, like, maybe talk with, other superintendents and see what, at least get a litmus test of who might be interested in doing something like that? 'Cause
Yep.
We could
certainly
also
that might
talk
be
with
a first,
CABE. Yeah,
I mean,
we
the
have
CAPS
CABE,
group,
we have
I'm
CAPS,
sure
we have
there's gonna be 2 different
CASBO,
groups.
yeah.
There's gonna be the groups or the cities that get what they ask for,
Right.
and then there's everyone else. I bet you everyone else has a lot more weight when you start putting them together as a group.
Who's paying the tax roll? It's usually the smaller towns,
Right.
so.
I will put the feelers out there.
Okay.
And just a quick comment, and, you brought up the Chef case, superintendent, and, again, not a lot of people know until you go back and do the research, but there were several court mandates coming out of that Chef case over the course of over 20 years before that case got settled. And during the course of those 20-plus years, every single mandate was not met. And they still settled 20 years later, and here we are still having issues. So, the legal battle isn't necessarily a quick, bright line to finding solutions or answers. That's all I'll say with that.
That is true. Okay, 31. With the range of services we offer the district, how many outplaced students have we been able to bring back into the district from last year to this year? And how much has that saved us in outplacement costs, net less the cost in district? We were able to return 10 students. The total transportation and tuition for these 10 was $879,460. The approximate in-district cost to program for these 10 students is $279,667. Net difference in savings is approximately $600,000.
So Which is great when you look at it that way. I want to, if you allow me to, and maybe I can, as part of the next week's meeting, the January 23rd meeting, elaborate a little further on this question for you, because that is accurate in terms of the amount of students that came back, but we also know sometimes students leave. And so we have to factor that into. But I think another important piece of information is, if we think back to the tuition analysis last week, how many kids last year maybe had special ed services, their needs increased, and we didn't outplace them. We placed them in one of our programs, and there were savings there too. So there's like different kind of lanes depending on how you look at the question in terms of what the answer could be. So for the sake of this exercise, we answered the question as posed, but I think we could give you more information to help, dive deeper on that.
I think the interesting part about this is, though, it's not, we had talked about cost avoidance during the last one. This is not avoidance.
Correct.
This is savings.
This is savings.
So I think
This
what
is
we're trying to
actual
do is point out, this is a savings. It's hard to pin your numbers on cost avoidance. You can pin on a cost savings.
Yeah.
But to your
We
point-
would want to factor in the amount of excess cost we got back for those students last
That was
year
the
when they
reason
were
for the debt,
outplaced.
right?
Yeah, we have to do the excess cost calculation that we got back and compare really that cost, once that's subtracted, because we did get that back, against the placement cost. That would be a better number for you. So we will follow up with you on more information on that, but I just wanted to clarify there.
That my comment was what Zaya said.
No, okay.
Yeah, it's
Which
just-
is,
This is very clear.
yep,
But it's one element of many elements.
yep.
And the bottom line is, I think it's the right thing to do.
For sure.
Not only for the students, but for the town.
Yep. So we'll drill down a little more for you on this and try and give you a little more information for next week.
Thanks.
Okay, number 32. Is the decrease in the poverty level numbers based on actual increased income of existing residents, or is that a result of higher income folks moving into town? The answer is that it can be a combination of any of the following as calculated annually. Relative to Title I funding, the calculated poverty rate used for Title I funding is based on data from the U.S. Census Bureau, specifically the Small Area Income and Poverty Estimates Program. This data provides annual estimates of poverty for school-aged children ages 5 through 17 within a school district. Improved local economic conditions: if a household incomes have risen for existing families, fewer children qualify as living below the poverty line. Demographic changes: if higher income families have moved into Southington, they increase the total number of children without increasing the poverty rate, thus lowering the poverty rate. The outmigration of lower income families: if families experiencing poverty have left the district due to housing cost or other factors, the poverty count may decrease. And data updates and methodology: the Census Bureau periodically refines its estimates, and small shifts in methodology or reporting can impact a district's reported poverty rate.
So the short answer would have been, it's both. But I wanted to try and provide a full explanation of all the different ways it could move.
The rationale behind that is when you're 0.03% off, and that differential 0.03% cost us how much?
200,000 plus, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's worth investigating.
That was 2 years ago. This year, we were a little further away. But it's still, to your point, for us, it's hard.
Okay, last question. You referenced the state share for education funding being lower than other states. Where does Connecticut fall relative to its contribution percentage for education funding compared to other states? As of January 2025, the most recent comprehensive data available on public school funding by state is for the 2021 school year. Detailed data for the 22-23 school year has not been released by the National Center for Education Statistics. As of that year, Connecticut ranked 45th out of 50 states, with only 5 other states providing less education funding than Connecticut. So what that, to me, translates to is the burden is on the local district. Okay. Okay, and that was the end of our, what?
I would just say we're not a poor state either. We're not Mississippi or some of those states.
Just for information's sake, the only 5 states lower than us in education funding are New Jersey, which is interesting,
Really?
another not poor state, Illinois, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Missouri.
So 3 of those are pretty
Yeah,
well.
based on that list. So it's interesting in that regard. But I would say, since that's an old data set, the only other thing I would add, which I think just is consistent with where we rank, is that example that I provided in the budget book of how little has increased, dating back 7 years, in terms of, you know, the amount our budget has grown against the amount of increased aid we've realized is not even close to proportional.
And I'll add to that, I highlighted last year, right, we're also the #1 tax state in the country, so,
We're still number one?
yeah.
We still are? Yes.
And just another comment to that, I don't know if you saw in the news, I actually saw it a couple of days ago, that a consortium of mayors and superintendents from our largest cities actually, you know, approached the delegates in Hartford with a direct ask, right, in this next session, to move forward with a bill that would increase statewide our per pupil spend, which hasn't changed based on the news report in over a decade.
Correct.
Yeah,
Over a decade.
over a decade.
2013, I think it was. Was that the year? Yeah. Mr. Brzezinski?
You know, and again, too, not to like beat a dead horse with it, but I mean, the way that I look at it is, you throw money at a problem, it doesn't necessarily mean you get better results, right? So even if we spent $30,000 per student, again, like, I don't know necessarily like how you'd be better at what you do. I think the fact that our staff are able to do what they do, the fact that we're able to get kids out of our system that go on to Air Force Academy, to some of these Ivy League schools, and, you know, they literally wind up all over our country and abroad. You know, we're able to do a lot with less, and, you know, again, like, while it's nice to try and get more, I'll tell you, for what we're doing while we're trying to do that and trying to grow our district, I mean, hats off to our staff, hats off to our families in town. You know, we're doing a lot of good work.
I'm not going to argue that our staff doesn't do a phenomenal job, because they do. I mean, obviously, they do. My problem that I'm seeing is that we're burdening our local
Well,
taxpayers,
right.
and we understand that nobody likes to see a tax increase. We all get that, because we're all taxpayers. Nobody likes to see that. But when you don't see the contribution from the state, you know, I believe, was it 21% of our budget used to be funded by the state? Now we're down to 17. It hasn't increased, even though everything else has increased. You know, you just see a particular, and Mr. Medancy shared the other night, North Carolina, one of the Carolinas, it's the reverse. It's 17% from the local tax base, and the rest comes from the state. So,
State and federal.
state and federal. So I understand that, you know, we're stuck, but it's the kids that are being impacted. That's my big problem with this whole thing, is that, yeah, no one likes to have a tax increase, but on the other hand, it's our kids. It's for the kids, and we can't go backwards. We want to move forward with the program, with what we have now, and we want to move forward.
Bottom line, we have to put, regardless of what the state's gonna give us,
Yeah,
we have to put together a budget
Yeah.
and bring that forward that we feel meets the needs of our kids and our families in the district, regardless of what the state's gonna give us.
Yeah.
And hope we get that local support that we need in order to do that. Because that's just the conundrum we're in with the current funding formulas and mechanisms that we're dealt with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was,
Okay. Mr. Brown, Mrs. Carmody? then-
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of nuance what Joe said. I don't think it's the high end, the top end, that gets hurt. We're gonna send students, our top students, to some good universities and stuff. What troubles me is that students now are different than they were 10 years ago. There's more mental illness, there's more challenges, more needs than they used to have. And I totally am on board with, we need to get the state to pay more, because we're all aware of taxes, and it's foolishness just to say, let's raise local taxes by a large amount, but that's not responsible. The state's got to come across and pay more. But I think the ones that really could suffer if budget cuts are too severe are the ones who struggle. You know, then you have people servicing more people than they can get to. And I also agree totally. It's amazing, and this isn't just kissing up to people. The staff in this town does an incredible job. I mean, on our curriculum committee, for example, the stuff we see from these teachers, the thoughtfulness, the making it relevant, making it useful in people's lives is amazing. But what worries me is the students who struggle, and the ones that and one of the things I think is beautiful about public education and democracy, it's the great equalizer. Everybody deserves a fair, quality education. We don't just, when I was a kid, unfortunately, I remember some certain students, they just were kind of written off. And we don't do that anymore. We know everyone counts, and sometimes they cost a lot of money to give them social services, but that's where I worry, is the one struggling. And the other thing that's happening is teachers are struggling because of that, and we're having difficulty attracting people to the profession. Look at the positions we can't even fill, not teachers, but other things too. That's where I see a problem.
And
But
the teachers are now in that bucket. You know, we used to get for an elementary ed opening, for one elementary ed, anywhere from 75 to 100 applicants right now. It's far lower than that right now. I would argue that it's probably less than 20. And out of those 20, once you screen applications and bring people in terms of the caliber of teacher we're looking for, you're looking single digits, and the principals start fighting over them. So it's a far different landscape right now, and it's very competitive.
Okay.
That's actually why, and I'm sorry to, and I'll end it here. I'm grateful that the board recognized that in the latest contract negotiations for our teachers. We need to be competitive, and they deserve what they get.
Mr. Darrenowski, you had your hand up, I thought. Oh, you're good. Mrs. Carmody.
I wanted to comment on what Joe said. I totally agree with you, Joe, that we do a wonderful job with what we have. There's no question about it. However, as Mr. Brown alluded to, we have to make certain that we are reaching all the students. And sometimes I'm not certain that we are. And we are doing, as you can see, the number of students we brought back into the district and the money that was saved. And I guess, Steve, you're going to elaborate more on that to give us the final numbers. There's no question that our staff does a wonderful job with what we have, and look where our kids go to school, look at how well they're doing, but we have to be cognizant that there are so many kids today that have such a variety of special needs, and we have to make sure we address those. And I don't know if the state is hearing us on that, Joe. I don't think they are. I mean, you know, we've tried, we've sent delegations up there. Many of us, through my 18 years on the board, we've gone up there to try to talk to them, to let them know what's going on, and they don't hear us. I don't even know sometimes, and I don't mean this to be super critical, and it's probably going to sound that way, but I don't even know if our town officials hear us when we tell them that the definite needs that all of our students have in this system. We have to make certain that we address them. That's our job as a Board of Education, to take care of all of our students. So not that I disagree with you, Joe, but I think there's a caveat to that. Okay, I just need to say that.
Okay. Jay, did you want to? Oh.
So, back to, I guess echoing some of what Steve said a minute ago, right? Like, we are charged to do the work. So, kind of looking at the work, right? Salaries and benefits this year, total increase in this budget, right? This budget reflects right now, this request reflects a $7.6 million increase, right? Over $6.5 million of that is salaries and benefits. The biggest driver being the projected health insurance, which rose 16.6% year over year. It's over $3 million of the increase. Transportation, right now, we're projecting it to be $621,000 more than what it was this year. We talked about the excess cost grant, right? We're losing money there. The state's not meeting their need there, right? Their commitment. While all this is happening, though, if you go through this budget, we talked about the changes with the middle school, with the class structures there, which gave us an opportunity with some savings as well. And I know that's not why we did it. I think it's important to highlight that we've added 168 hours of instruction time per student in the core subject areas, which is remarkable. So in doing that, we've still been able to avoid about $1.5 million in what would have been staffing needs based off of those needs. And we've also, going through this budget, there's another $750,000 or so of line item reductions that have happened. So I just think it's really important when you look at the solution space of where you want to, if you want to look for opportunity to make cuts, I believe there's a lot of them that have been reflected in the work that's been done. You know, this is, education in Connecticut is expensive. And we talk all the time about the pork and the fat that's kind of rolled up in this, and some of it's out of our control. We have to control what we can. And again, I appreciate all the work that's been done here. I think we obviously have to continue to look at it. And, you know, I know last time we talked, we came up with some technology plans and things that we could do to try to offset some costs. And I challenge everybody, please continue to look for anything that you can find. But again, I just want to highlight that. I think it's important that the public and everyone who's listening actually hears what's actually shown here, and the work that's been done and the good work that's been done to try to offset cost where possible.
Yeah, very good point. And I think when you start looking at what's new in this budget, I'm having trouble finding anything that's new in this budget, right? So, and I agree with you, Mrs. Carter. I don't think the state is hearing us, and that's why I think having this consortium of the smaller, mid-sized towns getting together and working on that is gonna be really important, because they have to listen at that point. There is a stronger voice. But one important thing, we talked about the teachers and what the teachers are doing. There's one line in here, I just wanna make sure that it's not misinterpreted. And you just said it, to attract and retain teachers in this town, we have to pay fairly, pay equitably, right? And there's a line in this summary that says, finally, higher than usual salary increases through recent collective bargaining agreements, raising health insurance, have further strained our financial services. I don't think you mean, and I will take, there was not a higher than average teacher increase this year. When we start looking at the equity that went into putting the increase for the teachers, it was a market fair rate increase. There was one contract that was higher than normal, smaller group,
Yep,
20
much smaller
some odd people.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to make sure people didn't read this and say that the higher than average salary increase was for the teachers. It was not.
No, we had, well, that's why I said bargaining units. We've negotiated with 4 different bargaining unit groups, and a couple of those bargaining unit groups were far below the market rate, as you recall if you were on any of those committees.
Yep.
And so there was no, the way collective bargaining works, you can either go to arbitration and see if you can stay low, or you can look at the comp data that you have and read the tea leaves and understand that you need to come in at a number that everyone's going to agree to, and that's financially responsible, but also in a couple of those bargaining units, you know, were justified given how low they were and the demand that those groups, those professionals were in. The healthcare group is the group that comes to mind,
Right,
right?
That was,
Well-deserved, and
Yes.
maybe even not enough at that point to
Yeah.
retain, right? But attracting and retaining teachers, this increase is not the driving force for attracting.
Oh, no, not at all. And I hope it didn't come across that way. That's not at all what I meant.
yeah.
Well, just to add numbers to that, right, the overall salaries, you know, all across, and some of it's market adjustments as well, it's all less than 5% when you
4.2.
total it all up, right, it's below.
4.2.
But then when you look again, you go into the health insurance that's where we see all the cost going up, right, again, it's a almost 17% increase, so.
As long as it's not misinterpreted.
Agreed,
That's
100% agreed.
That's what we want to make
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. No, thank you for that clarification.
All right.
So, again, just to build off of, what Jasper was saying, so 90% of this proposed budget is people and transportation.
Yeah.
You know, and again, like what I do want to, you know, sing your praises, Steve, and, you know, certainly with our counselors that are here this evening, there's always been a disconnect of transparency when it came to the Board of Education proposing a budget, you know, what we were looking at as far as numbers and everything else. I'm proud that, number one, making sure that things are in the right bucket. This is my 8th budget cycle on the board myself, we've never been able to get through this book in one sitting. And again, like, everything's laid out, everything is very specific, there's none of these, you know, again, like, what we used to call the pork and fat, or, you know, these like hidden things where it's like, okay, well, we don't really need this number, but we're gonna keep it there because we're gonna be able to take money out of that account to put it somewhere else. We don't do business like that anymore, which, from the level of transparency and everything else, and, you know, getting on the right plan, trying to build better relationships with the finance board, with our town manager, as far as, again, a capital request being put in for a capital request, rather than being built into a budget that now, oh, by the way, we can't unwind until we do some major production, like building a new school or something like that. So, you know, this is really a team sport, and I look forward to working with the other boards, and, you know, again, this,
Getting it
as
through
far
to
as
the
I'm
end.
concerned, it's a level budget. You know,
It is.
so.
Okay, with all that being said, February 5th, the governor is going to come out with his budget. So what I'd like to propose, which we talked about briefly on Tuesday night, is that on February 6th, once we hear what the governor is proposing, I'm going to go to a seminar Thursday morning with CABE. They're going to go through the governor's proposal. And I'm sure you're going to have something with CAPS. What I'd like to do is then on Thursday night, have a short meeting and vote on the budget, to see if there's any, on the 6th, yeah, of February.
Thursday night.
Yeah, it's a Thursday night. There may, you know, I don't know if there's going to be any adjustments in the governor's budget. I don't know what he is planning, but if there's any increase in funding, you know, that kind of thing. So we could then vote on it. So
Did you say the 6th?
the 6th, yes, Thursday night.
I won't be able to attend. I'll be at the Pathway to STEM at the Connecticut Science Center. I've already committed to that. I'm making
Okay.
a presentation.
What time is your?
That is from 5 o'clock to 8
Oh,
o'clock.
Okay.
And you involved in that?
He's presenting, yeah.
You're doing the presentation on
Are you gonna be?
Can we do a consensus tomorrow? Do we just check calendars?
Okay. All right, why don't we do that? I'll send something out.
Yeah, you
and
do
then-
have, and you also have your board meeting on Thursday, the 23rd.
That's
So
true.
you could actually finalize a date then, when
Yeah, we
everybody
can
has
do
time
that
to.
then. I just wanted to get.
I just want to check with the town manager too, to make sure, like, what's
the
his
date
drop
is.
dead date in terms of, you know, Mr. Schroeder told me last year, like, yes, you can do that, just make sure you get me this number by this
What the
date, because it
actual date
becomes
is,
part
yeah.
of his budget.
So we have to get by whatever the date is, but I, off the top, I don't know what the actual, for some reason, I'm thinking it's the 14th or something, but I could be wrong. So we'll get our calendars together. Okay, if there's no further questions, meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all,
I don't know why it's
all for being here.
One's black, one's, yeah, it's my key. One's black, one's orange. I don't know why. That's my car.